The final UFC event of 2024 has come and it has gone, headlined by Joaquin Buckley and Colby Covington, a top 10 matchup in the welterweight division in Tampa, Florida. We will talk about the results from that main event where Buckley remained undefeated in the 170-pound division and what could be next for him. And we will talk about the rest of the card because there were some big-time knockouts and some big-time performances. Let's get into it right now. And we start with Joaquin Buckley, Colby Covington. Buckley, New Mansa remains perfect at welterweight. 6 consecutive victories dating back to May 20th, 2023, 4-0 inside of the 2024 calendar, 4 of the 6 victories by way of KO TKO. Joaquin Buckley is on fire right now. He is in his prime at 30 years old, and he is running through his competition. Finishes over Vicente Luque, finishes over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and a finish over former interim champion, 3-time undisputed title challenger, Colby Chaos Covington. He gets the job done via doctor stoppage TKO 4 minutes and 42 seconds into the third round, right before we were getting ready to head into the championship rounds 4 and 5. And from the second the bell rang to start this fight to the second the referee waved off this fight due to the doctor's advice, this was a one-way traffic performance from Joaquin Buckley, who only got taken down once by the all-American wrestler that is Colby Covington, and was able to get up with relative ease and absolutely dominated this fight in the striking realm. Sliced open Colby Covington's eyelid very early on in that first round. You could tell that it severely impacted Colby throughout the remainder of the bout, was constantly hitting it with his hands, trying to rub away the blood. You could tell just how much of an irritation that it was causing to Colby, and it just continued to get worse and get worse and get worse. It was pouring blood at certain instances of this fight. Joaquin Buckley was relentless, he was accurate, and he was powerful. This was a very eye-opening performance to do this against someone that is a type of opponent we have not seen Joaquin Buckley have to face yet. Someone who is so well versed in the grappling and wrestling world, and Joaquin Buckley answered that call so successfully, way more successfully than many people probably would have even expected. He came into this bout ranked number 9, and Colby Covington was number 6 at 170 pounds, and after this, come Tuesday morning, he will absolutely take that number 6 spot, if not a spot or two even more, because of how impressive this outing was from Joaquin Buckley. He has solidified himself as not only a true, legitimate prospect with high ceiling at 170 pounds since making the transition from 185 to welterweight, but he has solidified himself as a legitimate title contender. And it's such a fun discussion right now. The 170-pound division is probably the best it's ever been, dare I say, if we're talking top to bottom. I mean, find me another time where welterweight was this exciting. If it has been, it's been a very, very long time ago because we've had dominant champions. We've had George St. Pierre dominate this division. We've had Kamaru Usman dominate this division. We had Matt Hughes dominate this division, but now we're kind of playing hotcake. We had Leon Edwards dethrone Kamaru Usman. We had Bilal Muhammad dethrone Leon Edwards. We had Shavkat Rakhmonov undefeated take on Ian Machado Gary undefeated just last week at UFC 310 for an opportunity to dethrone Bilal Muhammad, and we saw Shavkat Rakhmonov defeat Ian Machado Gary. He is next in line for Bilal Muhammad's newly crowned welterweight throne, and Joaquin Buckley is now creeping in right behind those big names of Machado Gary, of Shavkat Rakhmonov, of Bilal Muhammad, of Jack Della Maddalena, of Kamaru Usman, who was the longtime champion that is still sitting amongst the top of this division. This division and the title contention race in specific is absolutely thriving right now. There's so many new opportunities and new matchups that you can place each of these fighters into. That is a very good spot to be in if you are the UFC. And Joaquin Buckley had a very unique way of asking the crowd who they wanted to see him fight next. He first named Leon Edwards. The crowd made a small roar. He then named former champion Kamaru Usman. The crowd made a pretty noticeably loud roar. And then he named the welterweight champion Bilal Muhammad. Decently loud, but Kamaru Usman got the biggest crowd applause of those three options. Now, is that what we do? Is that what the UFC is going to do in their matchmaking meeting next week, is say, well, the crowd voted for Kamaru Usman, that's who we're going to give Joaquin Buckley to fight next? I don't necessarily think so. I lean toward the side that we're going to get Jack Della Maddalena versus Kamaru Usman at UFC 312 in February in Australia. At least I'm holding out hope for that. So if that fight does happen, let's lay out the landscape of the current title race at 170 pounds and what more Joaquin Buckley has to do to see himself standing across from the champion in this weight class. So as I started this discussion with, it is Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Belal Muhammad. That is going to be the next 170-pound title fight, maybe in the spring or early summertime of 2025, depending on Belal's recovery from his injury that he had to pull out of UFC 310 with. Then we have, hopefully, fingers crossed, Kamaru Usman versus Jack Della Maddalena in February at UFC 312. That's a fight that I would really, really want to see. And let us not forget about Sean Brady, who currently sits at number 5 in the 170-pound division. After suffering defeat for the first time in his career to Belal Muhammad in October of 2022, he has bounced back with 2 consecutive victories, a finish over Kelvin Gastelum, and a unanimous decision victory main event over Gilbert Durinho Burns, a former title challenger. So back in September, when Sean Brady beat Gilbert Burns, I remember vividly requesting him to face Colby Covington next. That is not what we ended up getting. More so probably for the reason that Colby had to step in on short notice to replace Ian Machado Gary, who was originally supposed to headline UFC Tampa against Joaquin Buckley, but Belal Muhammad had to be pulled out of his title fight. In stepped Ian Machado Gary versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. So Sean Brady has been left without an opponent, but he did just fight in September. So who will we see him face in early 2025? Well, the answer may be quite simple. If we do in fact get Kamaru Usman versus Jack Della Maddalena in February, then I think you got to do Sean Brady versus Joaquin Buckley next. However, if we don't get Jack Della Maddalena returning from injury to take on Kamaru Usman, and instead we get a Jack Della Maddalena versus Sean Brady, then Joaquin Buckley can get what the crowd roared for at UFC Tampa, a matchup with Kamaru Usman. And then the other matchup would be if Kamaru Usman takes on Sean Brady, we could do Jack Della Maddalena versus Joaquin Buckley. Those are the 4 names that are the most interchangeable right now. Ian Machado Gary, yes, is still very much a part of this discussion, but he is coming off of a loss, whereas everyone else is coming off of a victory. I wanted to see, personally, Ian Machado Gary take on Leon Edwards in the main event of UFC London in March. So that is how I would do the rest of this division. You get the title fight with Belal and Shavkat. You do Kamaru Usman versus Jack Della Maddalena or Joaquin Buckley. Then you do Sean Brady versus the outsider of that discussion, so whether that be a Kamaru Usman, a Jack Della, or a Joaquin Buckley. And then you do Leon Rocky Edwards versus Ian Machado Gary in March. That is how I would play out the discussion of the title contenders at welterweight right now. Look at all those names. That's literally 6 or 7 names that are all quite literally 1 win away from standing across from a champion in this 170-pound weight class. If it wasn't for all of those names that are surging right now, you could say a victory like Joaquin Buckley had over Colby Covington at UFC Tampa is absolutely a certainty to get him in as the next number 1 contender, but that just isn't the lay of the land right now at welterweight. So be sure to let me know in the comments below your whole thoughts on this division. What do you make of it? Now, the only certainty it seems like is that Shavkat versus Belal matchup, but then you have Leon Edwards, you have Kamaru Usman, you have Jack Della Maddalena, you have Sean Brady, you have Joaquin Buckley, and you have Ian Machado Gary. You have 6 names that you can mix and match however you please. I want you to give me your matchmaking in the comments below. And I guess quickly, we do have to talk about Colby Covington, being that he is a former interim champion, being that he has challenged for the undisputed title not once, not twice, but 3 times throughout his career, been unsuccessful in all 3 of those. He's 36 years old. He's lost 4 of his last 6 fights. What do you really do now with Colby Covington, who at one time and probably still is one of the biggest names in the entire UFC roster right now, but with no momentum, aging toward the end of his career, taking the damage that he has taken in some of these fights, like the bout with Kamaru Usman, like this fight here with Joaquin Buckley, what do you really do with Colby Covington? Is he going to face someone like a Jeff Neal or a Stephen Thompson or an undefeated phenom that is Michael Morales? I just can't see him really taking on those types of fights. So we will see. Time will tell, but I don't really have anything fresh of mind for Colby Covington. It is back to the drawing board for now. I don't foresee him retiring by any means, but he is in a very strange spot. And from the main event discussion, let's get into the rest of UFC Tampa, and we start in the co-main event where at 41 years young, Cub Swanson one-punch knockout over Billy Quarantillo. 41. Never looked so good. Cub Swanson made his UFC debut November 12th of 2011 after the absorption of WEC, where he fought 5 times back in the day against the likes of a Jose Aldo and a Chad Mendes. He's a true OG, a true legend, and a true pioneer of the lower weight classes of mixed martial arts, and he has fought the who's who of this weight class for well over a decade, nearly now a decade and a half plus. And coming into this fight, it seemed as though it may have been his last dance, his final ride as a mixed martial artist. But after a performance like this, a war, mind you, with Billy Quarantillo, where he comes out on the winning side, not by decision, not by edging it out on the scorecards, by with a one-punch, convincing knockout victory in the 3rd round over Billy Q. To do this at 41, in the lower weight classes especially, an absolute beast is Killer Cub, who has had 44 professional bouts to his name now. But man, I'll tell you what, if he wants to fight one more time, if he wants to fight 3 more times after this performance, considering he's not really been losing, right? He's not been on losing streaks in the UFC. He's been winning one, losing one, winning one, losing one. I want to see Killer Cub go as long as he wants to. Next up is a huge discussion for the flyweight division, and that is because Manel Kape finished Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva was on a 4-fight win streak, a 4-fight finish streak heading into this bout against Manel Kape. He was number 12, Kape at number 9, a massive fight in this division. I put out on X before the fight began that don't sleep on this one in terms of the winner of this, barring a lackluster performance, could truly be next for Alexandre Pantoja, given the state of the division, being that Pantoja has quite literally cleared out pretty much everyone there is to clear out in the 125-pound weight class, and that is exactly what Manel Kape did. He had a big-time performance from start to finish. He has won 5 of his last 6 fights since starting his UFC career 0-2. He is a former champion in Ryzen. Keep that statement in mind for later on in this discussion. Manel Kape, the only loss dating back to August of 2021 was a razor-close decision against Muhammad Mokaev back in July. He is 31 years old. He has finished 17 of his 20 victories. He is always in a barn burner fight in this 125-pound flyweight division, and this one was no different against Bruno Silva. Bruno tried to give Manel everything that he could handle, but it just wasn't enough. Manel Kape's speed looked unbelievable in this fight.
He's fast. He's really, really fast. I mean, he's so fast. He makes fast people look not fast.
Believe me, he has hands. He's showed how fast he is before, but this one was different. This was just a special performance from Manel Kape, a true star-making type of performance. You pair that with the antics that he was doing, telling him to come bring it like he was The Rock, doing Fortnite emotes, dribbling the basketball between his legs, you name it, he did it. Things that we've seen Israel Adesanya do, things that we've seen Anderson Silva do when they toy with their opponents. Manel Kape was in that zone. He was in the flow state that so many fighters want to achieve when they are in these high-level bouts, and he did it at the right moment against a surging ranked fighter. And what do we do next now with number 9 ranked Manel Kape, who come Tuesday morning should absolutely be higher than that in the rankings? So we, of course, have to start this what's next discussion with the current champion at 125 pounds, which is Alexandre Pantoja, who just successfully defended his title for the 3rd time at UFC 310, where he submitted the newcomer into the UFC, former Ryzen champion Kai Asakura. Pantoja has wiped the 125-pound rankings clean. He has beat Brandon Royval twice. He has beat Brandon Moreno twice. He has beat Steve Erceg. He has beat Kai Asakura. And he has even beaten Manel Kape. So if you want to look at it from that perspective, there's one name amongst the title contenders that I did not mention, and that is KKF, Kai Kara France, who was on a 2-fight skid but turned it all around when he finished former title challenger Steve Erceg earlier on this year. I believe back in August. He knocked him out. He is currently sitting at number 4 in the division, and he is the only name that not only Alexandre Pantoja hasn't beaten, but Alexandre Pantoja has not even fought yet. So, if Alexandre Pantoja doesn't get what he asked for at UFC 310 and Demetrius Johnson does in fact stay retired, which it looks like he's leaning more toward the side of staying retired, then do we do Pantoja versus Kai Kara France? Many of you would probably say yes. However, on X last night in the poll that I posted at Verbal Sparring MMA, 80% of the votes went toward Manel Kape, a rematch for the title this time. Manel Kape versus Alexandre Pantoja 2. That was Manel Kape's first fight in the UFC in February of 2021, where he lost a decision to Alexandre Pantoja. The fight before that, the final fight in Rizin for Manel Kape, a knockout in the second round over, you guessed it, Kai Asakura. So there are storylines, don't get it twisted. Whether it's a rematch between Pantoja and Manel Kape, which you could gladly sign me up for, or Kai Kara France versus Alexandre Pantoja, a fresh matchup, a fan favorite in Kai Kara France, a fan favorite, or at least I should say someone who has turned into a fan favorite during his title run in Alexandre Pantoja. Those are the clear 2 next men up for the flyweight title, but who will get the actual shot? That is the question for us to discuss and for the UFC to answer. Do we even get to the point where Pantoja sits on the shelf just a little bit longer and plays it out to where Kai Kara France and Manel Kape run into one another and they square off for a fight? Let us not forget, they've had their fair share of moments in a UFC press conference before.
Yeah, stand up, motherfucker! Stand the fuck up! Stand the fuck up, motherfucker! What you want? What you want?
That could be a grudge match, and the winner comes out as the true number 1 contender. It kind of just depends on how quickly we could make that fight happen. Being that Kai Kara France hasn't fought since August, being that Manel Kape took virtually no damage in this one-sided beating of Bruno Silva, you probably realistically could make that fight happen at UFC 312 in February in Australia in front of Kai Kara France's home crowd. The winner of that in the summer faces the champion that is Alexandre Pantoja. I think I want to see that. I want to see Kai Kara France versus Manel Kape. Settle the beef, settle the rivalry. Oh, and by the way, the winner comes out as the next challenger to Alexandre Pantoja's flyweight throne. But do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments below. Next, we go to the light heavyweight division where 2 former top 15 fighters squared off with one another, but both coming in with little to no momentum. And that is because Dustin Jacoby had lost 4 of his last 5 bouts. That is because Vitor Petrino was coming off of a submission finish against Anthony Smith back in May. And while this wasn't a very exciting fight, to be quite frank with you, heading into that 3rd round, 3 minutes and 44 seconds turned the tide of that narrative because Dustin Jacoby landed a virtually identical knockout to when Kamaru Usman knocked out Jorge Masvidal a couple of years ago. Dustin Jacoby brings through the right cross and cleans Vitor Petrino's clock, put him to sleep on the canvas. A massive bounce-back win for Dustin Jacoby to give himself some momentum, to keep him amongst the discussions of the top 15 of this light heavyweight division. Big win for the big-time kickboxer, Dustin Jacoby. And a fight that'll probably get overshadowed in the grand scheme of UFC Tampa, but I want to give a little bit of shine to, was Daniel Marcos defeating Adrian Yanez via very close split decision to improve to 17-0, undefeated in his career. He does have 1 no contest, but I believe he's now 4-0 in the UFC. Yanez had just bounced back earlier this year from his own 2-fight skid, was coming in as a decently sized underdog, so much so that I even bet on Adrian Yanez. This was a very back and forth fight, but in that 3rd round, Marcos did what Yanez was not expecting based off of how rounds 1 and 2 went, and that was utilize his wrestling to take him down 2, maybe 3 times. That is what ended up giving him the nod on the scorecards. A big big win for Daniel Marcos, definitely an underrated talent in this super stacked 135-pound division, but now he will absolutely be in the top 15 discussion and probably fighting someone ranked. And we will finish off this recap by talking about a 3-fight knockout stretch on the prelims. First was Michael Johnson, 38 years young, one punch and done over Ottman Azaitar, who has suffered 3 consecutive losses, all by way of knockout. The 38-year-old Michael Johnson has actually won 3 of his last 4 bouts, even at this later stage of his career. It was his 42nd professional fight last night, debuted in the UFC. You got to scroll quite a bit, all the way back in December of 2010, 14 years, nearly to the day since his UFC debut, and he gets a knockout performance like this to get the crowd going bananas. Come on, man. Another legend of the UFC's lightweight division. Someone who even has victories over Tony Ferguson, a knockout over Dustin Poirier, beaten Edson Barboza. Michael Johnson's been in there with the who's who for over a decade. And we stay in the lightweight division because Joel Alvarez, welcome back to the top 15, because if this victory doesn't get him back in, I don't know what will. 31 years old, in his fighting prime, 22 wins, 3 losses, all 22 victories are by finish. 5 knockouts, 17 submissions. He ends Drakkar Klose's 4-fight win streak with a flying knee knockout 2 minutes and 48 seconds into the very first round. He has won 3 straight fights since succumbing to the hands of Arman Tsarukyan in February of 2022, with finishes over Mark Jacoby, Elvis Brenner, and Drakkar Klose. And prior to that Arman Tsarukyan fight, he was on a 4-fight finish streak. So in the UFC, he is 7-2. The only other loss was his UFC debut, a decision to Damir Ismagulov. Joel Alvarez is 6'3". He's long, he's rangy, and he is dangerous in all facets of mixed martial arts. One of the most exciting fighters at 155 pounds. Let's matchmake him real quick with a ranked fighter, shall we? How about we pair him with another long, rangy person in this division? Jalen Turner. We could see him take on Patty the Batty Pimblett. Maybe he takes on Benoit Saint Denis. Any of those 3 fighters right on the cusp of the top 10 at 12, 13, and 14 in this division makes sense to me. Joe Alvarez not only deserves it, but he has earned his crack to be back amongst the best of the best at 155 pounds. This guy, if he keeps his head on his shoulders, keeps trending in this direction, could be a champion before he calls it a career. And last but not least, we have to talk about the former heavyweight boxer turned featherweight newcomer to the top 15, Sean the Sniper Woodson. 13 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw, 32 years old, in his prime. This man has not lost a fight in 4.5 years, dating back to June 27th of 2020. Since then, he is on a 7-fight unbeaten streak, 4 consecutive victories, a draw sandwiched in there with Luis Saldana back in 2022. This man, Sean Woodson, much like Joe Alvarez, very long, very rangy for his weight class down here in the featherweight division. Sean Woodson, outside looking in. Who do we have in the back half? We have Edson Barboza, we have Dan Ige, we have Bryce Mitchell, we have Giga Chikadze. Ooh, Giga Chikadze versus Sean Woodson, striker versus striker. That's the one. Book it. Early 2025, Giga Chikadze, Sean Woodson. Yes, please. So that is it for today's recap. Please be sure to give me all of your thoughts and your takeaways from UFC Tampa, the final event of 2024, in the comments below. Your predictions for the welterweight division, your predictions for the flyweight title picture, and much, much more. If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, I recap the most meaningful results from every card. I break down and preview the best storylines heading into each card, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. Also, you can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.